So we'll just continue through and look for areas that have a lot of motion blur, and we don't want to put a core mat in that area. So we'll just keep scrubbing through. If we just look before the core mat and after, we can see exactly what's happening. So it's not affecting too many areas that we don't want. So that's good. There might be some areas we need to fill in later on. Still some really tiny areas. Like I said, I'm gonna comp this over and we'll see where the problems basically show themselves at the end. So we also have the rope mat that comes in here. This is why we didn't include the rope mat in our core alpha, because we get a result like that. Also, something that to note is sometimes you can get these weird sort of blending in terms of if you're using a max for the alpha. So sometimes it helps to try to do, you could do over, and sometimes over looks a little better. So you just need to look at it and see which one looks the best. So over seems to be working better there. You could also use screen, but you got to be careful by using. I would never use plus, because if you use plus, you'll get values over 1. But screen actually won't do that. It'll kind of just take the higher value, and let's just see. Yeah, actually screen could do it a little bit over, so you got to be careful. So for example, like this grade that we're doing is pushing our alpha past 1. So again, make sure you get that white clamp on. You don't want to have values over 1. So I would use over. Screen could actually work as long as you don't already have values over 1. The way screen works kind of is it takes, it's not adding them together. It's kind of combining them, but then whichever one has the higher value kind of stays. It's a little bit similar to a max sort of, but they're pretty different visually. So I would just, click through, but usually screen over either one. So we'll continue doing this little analysis here. So we'll go to the start frame and make sure you're always saving, because at this point the script will be getting a little bit heavier. So you see, like here, it's just doing a little bit too much, like overall, I think. So let's just see. I think, yeah, for example, we might even want to do a different type of core mat here. So what we could do is instead of just stenciling it in this area, because we still need some kind of core mat there, but we don't want it in all the motion blur. What we could do is put it in a road, and just for that area, we'll just erode it a little bit in. So we can just kind of shrink it in and then put a roto shape and plug it into this like so. Let me just expand that so it's a little bit less scary in terms of the way it's stacking up there. And we'll just roto this area so that that core mat is kind of staying a little bit more contained. And then we'll just roto that piece through as well. So we'll just bring that up. So you see it kind of just preserves our motion blur as that's moving along. And then we can always feather it off if that's also, if it's working kind of a little bit lower. So it seems to be doing an okay job on these frames, so I'm just kind of feathering it. So in the more motion blurry areas, it's a bit smaller of a core mat, and then we're just sort of fading off that alpha. So there's many different ways. So you see, we just talked about many different ways of adjusting our core mat. Just all things you can think about. And of course, a lot of this is experimenting. You saw I was kind of doing a trial and error to see what was working. Once you understand the concept of what an erode is and the concept of adjusting the white and black point of an alpha, it's just a lot of experimenting in different ways to see in what case we're going to have to use what, basically. So I'm just going to put this here. I'm just kind of shrinking that core mat a little bit so we can keep a softer edge with the filter erode there. And yeah, so up here, again, that might be somewhere we want to use the stencil instead of the erode, because we don't want any of that core mat there. So I'll just take, let's just take this guy and we'll put it here. And maybe add another shape in the stencil. I just don't want any of that area to be solid because we have a lot of motion blur there. So it should be see-through. So these high level keys take quite a lot of time to accomplish. If this was a TV show or something, we would probably be done with our key already. We wouldn't even go into this level of detail. They would probably expect just a faster result. So we wouldn't go really in the details, trying to get every little spot of motion blur or a little edge detail. Like you'll want to get as much as you can within the time frame that you have. But if you're on a compressed time budget, you know, it's not going to be this finessed. So here again, it's maybe it's giving us a little bit too much. So let me go back to our erode and just pull it in a little bit. So we don't want those harsh edges. We really don't want those sharp edges in the motion blur because those will show up in your comp at the end. And that's what makes a bad key, you know, and that's what makes someone able to key and somebody else who doesn't have as much experience potentially not getting as good of a key and having to go back and fix those things. So I'm going to go down here and just kind of blur this little edge here. It looks like we have just a little spot. So I'll just kind of blur that together. And same up here, just kind of blur those. I like to go through and blur those hard edges because they don't look natural. And all right, I think that's pretty good. So we'll go to our final key, just look at the end. And we could probably clean a lot of this area up with a grade. So one thing you can do is, I'll save this and just expand the script even more. So now that we have like a pretty solid alpha there, we could just clear those areas up in a quick way by doing our erode trick. So we did it on the last project as well, but we'll just do it again. So we'll just go here and kind of make a sharp alpha again. So I'll kind of get rid of the black point. So sort of like that. And we'll take that alpha and just kind of blur it. So we'll just sort of, let's just use a blur, actually. We'll use a blur. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to invert this. So it's just on the outside. And then I'm going to take another grade over here and basically do a black point adjustment to get rid of this. So we'll get rid of it, but you see it messes up our soft edge. So we'll use this as a matte. So we created this kind of soft feathered outside, and we can use that as a matte so that we don't, when we do this black point adjustment, we don't affect our edges. So we'll plug it in there. And now using the blur, let me try an erode instead, filter erode. And then you can adjust where that color correction is happening. So if I just gain up a little bit so you can see what I'm doing, we're using the erode to control where that color correction is happening. So we're adjusting that black point to get rid of the gray stuff, but we're gonna kind of keep it away from the edges, keep that effect away from the edges. And then we can just blur that a little bit to make it a softer transition. So you're not gonna notice it basically. So before and after, you see it kind of, we have a little bit of very little gray on the edge, but that doesn't really matter. and we're still maintaining edge detail. Now, we might not want to apply that everywhere because our motion blur areas might get affected a little bit. So we can just, again, roto this off. So this would be kind of a procedural cleanup matte or a procedural garbage matte. So that's what I would call it. So I'll just call this procedural cleanup garbage. Okay, and we really want to do that at the very end because we need a kind of a decent alpha to be able to do that. And then we don't want to apply it everywhere. So I'm going to do a mask and grab a roto node. So I did a merge mask and I plugged that into a roto, and then we're just going to put it on the side here. So we can do this, feather this like crazy, and we'll just apply it on this side, and maybe we'll duplicate this shape. So right click and hit duplicate, and then we'll put it over here as well to clean up some of that gray stuff. You want to be careful though, because on the soft areas you might lose some detail, but it looks like it's doing a very good job at this point. So we'll look through the whole comp and see if that maintains itself. And again, this is before the rope matte. So the rope matte is coming out on the very end because these type of color corrections, because they're killing the gray, our rope is kind of a gray alpha. So it would not play well with a semi-transparent alpha. So I guess as a general rule, you could probably think of it like if you're doing really, really motion blurred, tricky stuff, I would keep that after these kind of corrections. So I'll just place it there and go to the start and continue to animate this through. We could probably even do a little bit there. We could probably put it a little bit there if we want, because there is a little bit of gray still there. So we could just kind of put a slight shape there and just sort of blur it. So stuff like that might be, I don't know if that's motion blur or if that's supposed to be there. We might need to get rid of that area behind his neck. Again, these are all really tiny details, and they'll become apparent as we start to do our despill process. All right, so I think that's good, and we'll just go to the end and make sure we're all good. All right, so that's looking pretty awesome. I do think there's a little bit of roto missing. Actually, I think it's there. Maybe it's the last frame. Yeah, I think it's the last frame. I missed a little bit of this extra stuff. Let me just go one more frame and see. Yeah, so I think I missed just a little bit of the extra shape there. So I'll either add that or we'll just skip it for now and maybe go back to bring the rest of the belt in. But I'm just trying to explain the concepts and progress the class relatively quickly. So I think we'll move on to despilling, and then at the very end, if there's like a couple more areas on the key, like here, for example, there's going to be tiny little things everywhere that we can go through and clean up if we want to get that level of detail. But I'll make that its own video, like kind of a quality control, just so we can start to explain new concepts. Now that we're at a point that our alpha is looking pretty good. So if I play through it, like that's really showing our character compared to where we were. So if we just go back and compare with one key here, let's go way back to the top of the script and look. So if we look at the one key, that's what one key gave us, you know, and now we've combined, I don't know, more than, 15 or so keys. So if we see the difference, and rotoscopes. So if we just let it load for a second, we can see the difference. So that's a ton of work just to get a character off when there's not a good green screen. And that's pretty standard. A lot of the times your script will actually look like this if you're working on a high level. So yeah, now we will move on to despilling and fixing these white edges and these different areas. So I'll start to get into that and all kinds of different methods we can go in there and fix those kind of tricky areas. And after that, we'll go into doing some color grading on our character, animating it a little bit, so he'll be doing some interesting stuff, and we'll also add some animation to the background and do some stuff there. So we're going to make this a full shot at the end.